I've been on fire lookout duty for several years now. It's a great gig for someone needing to be outdoors, maybe just away from things. I can't claim that it's easy. It does get lonely out there sometimes among nothing but nature. And then there's bugs, finding snakes in your outhouse, a spider on your face while you're trying to sleep. But really, I wouldn't trade it for the world. But when you've been doing this for a long time, you learn things. A lot of other lookouts have learned them, and we don't talk about a lot of it. You just learn that's how things are when you're out in the forest. And there are unspoken rules you have to follow, for your own good. Even if you're not planning on applying for a lookout job, even as a hiker, you should listen. Some of these things I was told by rangers. Others are just mine and mine alone. First, if you're entering the forest, you gotta remember that you don't live here. You're visiting its house and you better be respectful. That's just how it is. Don't break branches off of trees. Don't carve your name on the bark. You leave them alone. Buy firewood here if you're staying the night, and don't you dare chop a tree down. There is exceptions, sure. Break off a dying or dead branch. Cut up a fallen tree that hasn't hit the ground. It won't get mad about that. And you don't want to make it mad. I've seen what happens when someone makes it mad. Secondly, if you're staying overnight, don't stay in the clearings. You can camp on the edge, but you don't want to be out in the open. If it sees you, it might not like you. I've seen how this thing hunts. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. I've had to call in more than a few untimely deaths from people who didn't listen to the rules. Even I won't stay in a clearing past dark. The moment the sun goes down, you get out of open space. You don't want it to see you after dark. That's when it hunts, if it feels like hunting. And it doesn't always want to, but it's better to not risk it. Bear. No, I'm not talking about a bear. Bears are easy. You make some noise, pull your jacket open to try to be bigger, and they go running. You get really used to that out here. Wolves are trickier, but they don't really want to bother us. This thing is older than bears and wolves, but I'm not about to cut it open and try counting its rings. There's always a danger with wildlife when you're out here. The rule is generally to keep your distance, to stay far away. And if you do encounter something that you don't want to mess with, well, there are ways to deal with it. Where was I? Oh, right. The guidelines to follow when you're out here. If you're going to work out here, you need to learn what to do if you see it. And it'll be challenging the first time. Most people get too scared to do things right, and they get killed. It's not unusual to see it from the tower. It'll make its rounds, and you will hear people on the radio saying that they saw the old oak moving around. I think it knows all of us by our faces and habits now. I think it likes to check on us. We're probably just a part of its whole ecosystem now, and it regards us like it does everything else. That means that we still have to follow its rules, the same as all the woodland creatures. That's why it's so important to follow the rules. Not just doing your job as a lookout, but by doing things right. No cutting down healthy trees, no overfishing, no excessive hunting. If you start a fire, you put that out and you make sure there's no chance of something bad happening. It'll know. It'll check on you. You'll know if it doesn't like what it sees. If you see it from the tower, just let it pass. It'll move on its own time. Don't stare at it. It knows when you're staring at it. If you see that giant, bone-colored oblong shape that we think is its face, just look down and go back to your work. Look in a different direction, anywhere except at it. It really doesn't like being stared at. Staring at it will get you killed. Jeremy stared at it the first time he saw it. The poor kid, we had hopes for him. But that thing doesn't like being stared at. We sent him home in a box. What was left of him anyways. That's just what you do. You let it do its thing. There's nothing we can do to really stop it if it doesn't like something. You just die, and that's that. Guns aren't going to do anything. Fire just makes it angry. It isn't afraid, and it doesn't care about anything but the forest. Even then, we're not sure if it really cares about the forest, or if it cares about its hunting ground. Heck, none of us are going to ask it to find out. Sometimes at night, it'll come to the tower. It might be hunting. It might just need to see something. I don't know. Keep your eyes closed. You'll know when it's there. You'll feel your skin crawl and you'll feel heavy. If you can move, pull your blanket over your head. Just keep your eyes closed. You'll know when it leaves. God, you'll know. And the last, well, the last is the most important. You're going to be out in the woods and you're going to find it. You'll hear nothing. Like the sound just vanishes. You'll think you've gone deaf. Even if you scream, you won't hear anything, and it'll make you go a little mad. That's when you know you're here. It'll look like a tree, but not a tree. Taller than anything with that empty shape for a face. Its roots are deep and long. It's old, we all know it, and you'll know it too. But if you find it and you stand there, well, listen to me very carefully. You look at the ground. You bow your dang head in reverence. Kneeling helps, but it doesn't matter. You just look down. And you say, you speak, even if you don't hear a sound, that you are sorry for bothering it. And then you wait. Sometimes it'll let you go. You'll hear again. You'll feel like you haven't eaten in days. Once you can hear, you call the nearest tower and confirm you're alive. You radio whoever is closest and you tell them you're alive. And then you just gotta go right back to your tower. It let you go. That's all it wanted. But sometimes it does something else. Sometimes it's hungry. It'll take whatever it wants from you. Blood, skin, soul, whatever it feels like taking, whatever it needs. It'll hurt. Heck, it'll hurt. But it doesn't take more than it needs. It knows the balance, and it'll give you an acorn. No matter how bad you're hurt, you go back to the tower and you plant that acorn. Rescue will probably get to you in time. You're here with us now. The forest is gonna get a little bit bigger every year. It'll inch through a little more, until it starts taking towns for itself. Nothing we can do to stop it. All we're here for is to make sure no fires get out of control. We've had a good record so far, even with the climate getting all messed up. Because I sure as heck don't want to see that old oak when it's really hurting. Hey, so some people were asking about more. Well, we don't usually talk about it. All us lookouts just know about the oak. And it doesn't make sense to talk among ourselves. We all know. We all just know. But maybe I can talk about it. Maybe it'll keep other people from making mistakes. Not following the rules. That's all you need to do. Just to follow the rules. I'll tell you about my first summer then. The first time that I saw it. And the first time that I met it. I'll tell you what it took. It was several years back. I dropped out of college. It was a state school and I was going to be a history teacher, but my mental health took a dive. Didn't realize I had depression. Didn't want to get out of bed, didn't want to go to class. Missed every class my second semester. Didn't show up for any tests. I just didn't have the will to do anything but to lie around, and maybe eat if I was having a good day. I told my parents and they were pissed at first, but my mom saw that I needed help. She tried, bless her heart, but she thought that I needed to be outdoors more, that staying inside wasn't helping. Dad was mad, but he actually took me to a doctor, got me on some proper meds. They made me sleepwalk now and then, but it wasn't anything crazy. I think the strangest was the time that my dad found me wandering into the kitchen and trying to make tea. He laughs about it to this day. Apparently, I really wanted to make some tea. But anyways, Mom found out about the job from one of her friends. Her idea was that if I spent a summer out in nature, I would do much better and go back to school and be a respectable man. I wasn't really sure. I had been a Boy Scout, got my Eagle Award, and knew a fair bit of survival. I had spent a lot of time at camp, and did a summer volunteering for a few weeks. It had been pretty fun. But a whole summer out there, with just a walkie-talkie and the occasional camper for company, that was intimidating. But also, it was exciting. And maybe it had been what I needed. Considering I'm still doing it now, I would say it was a good decision. I applied, interviewed, and soon enough, I had said goodbye for the summer and I was hiking to my tower. It was harder than I thought, and I got turned around at a large pine that I ended up calling Roundabout twice, but I finally managed to find my tower. I even found the snack cache that had a few things, mostly novels and granola bars, but it was comforting. Weird, right? Just something really mundane from home in the middle of nowhere that makes you feel better. Well, it did make me feel better. Honestly, my first week was a lot of looking around, learning my region, and talking with the other lookouts. Marcy was in the East Tower. We called it Lookout Mountain. Almost everyone could see her tower from ours. Percy was in the Riverside Tower. And on clear, quiet nights, we could hear him playing an out-of-tune guitar. And then there was me in the Lake Tower, which I later learned was one of the Old Oak's favorite hunting spots. And finally, Roland was in the South Tower, and he always called us with reports from other regions, or to tell us what the weather was going to be like. God above, I miss them even now. One night, I think it was almost at the end of my second week, I heard Marcy on the radio. "It's moving tonight, headed towards lake." I didn't know what she meant, and so I asked. The radio went quiet, and I asked again. Roland was the one who spoke up, and I'm glad he did. He always knew a bit about everything. "It's part of the forest. We've been calling it the Ancient Oak or the Old Oak or whatever. When it checks out your tower tonight, just keep your eyes closed. It doesn't like being stared at." No one talked on the radio after that. They all went silent, and we went about our business for the evening. I kept trying to look out the window to maybe see what was out there. Eventually, I couldn't stay awake anymore and had to just accept that I was going to bed. Hiking around takes a lot out of you, you know. I don't know when I felt it, but it was after I fell asleep. I tried to roll over, but I couldn't. All my limbs felt too heavy, too stiff. And then I made a mistake. I opened my eyes. It was there. Just a white shape looking into my windows. Just there, staring. It doesn't have eyes, but I know it was staring. I couldn't even scream. I couldn't even move. All I could do was stare, like a mouse staring at a very hungry cat. I've stared down bears, wolves, even the odd mountain lion or two, and they're all easy compared to that old oak. It doesn't like being stared at. I don't know what happened to me between that and when I seemed to come back. The sun was high and a search and rescue officer was asking how many fingers he was holding up. I remember holding on to a handful of acorns, and every step I took, the world spun. According to the officer, I had been missing for 3 days. The other lookouts had been trying to find me, scouting around their own areas and not finding much of anything. The officer was worried. Apparently someone walked up on one of those old abandoned staircases that you see in the woods, and they almost gave up hope. I didn't believe it. It all felt like it had been seconds and not days. I couldn't even describe what I saw. Just that white shape staring at me. I guess I was lucky it didn't kill me. The rescue team stayed with me for a few hours, making sure that I wasn't getting worse. I planted those acorns once they left. Something compelled me. I couldn't sleep until I did, couldn't drink, couldn't do anything until all 7 of them were planted deep. I dragged my sorry butt into my tower and I slept for the next day. I had a lot of questions after that. Marcy was the only one who was willing to explain it to me, but even she didn't talk about it much. All I knew was the oak was just part of the forest, that it just lived here. It hunted like any other animal, and it liked to check on us sometimes. I didn't know I would be seeing it again, not at the time. Though the forest range was too big for it to show up multiple times in the summer, and I hope that I didn't see it ever again. Just not knowing what I had done in those days where I was gone, I still didn't know, and that scared the crap out of me. Things were normal for a while after that. I would go out and make sure there were no idiot kids setting off fireworks, no fires being unattended, all that good stuff. I taught myself how to fish, which was pretty neat at the time. Never had the patience for it otherwise, but when I went on trips with Dad and Uncle Will, but it felt different out there. I saw the oak again from my tower once or twice, just moving out in the distance. I never looked too long, just found ways to occupy myself. Talked to Percy a lot about fiction trivia. Read a lot of the books left at the cache and discovered that maybe I liked Jane Austen novels. There was a lot to keep me busy and I did everything I could to keep myself busy. There was one night in July where I caught a bunch of kids setting fireworks off over the lake. Even left their fire burning completely unattended. No matter how I yelled and tried to intervene, they just wouldn't listen. And then one of their fireworks hit a young tree. One I only recognized because crows like to hang out in it and scream at me when I passed by. I watched the leaves catch fire and I ran instinctively to try and put them out. I was knee-deep in the lake with a few buckets when I felt the ground rumble, and I remembered Roland's advice. I forgot about the dumb kids and looked down. Maybe it was a blessing that everything around me went silent, because then I could hear what it did to those kids. I know I said before that it sounds worse than silence, that you hear nothing. Describing it isn't anything like experiencing it, just a complete nothingness. I didn't think I was alive at first. I just felt like everything around me was gone, but I still felt the cool water. I still felt dread, fear. I was more scared than I was when I told my parents that I had bombed my first year in college. It took an eternity before I could hear again. When I could move, I looked up once that I could hear. The tree was smoldering. I put it out. The kids were almost nowhere to be found, save for someone's leg. That was all that was there. It hadn't even been cut at the knee, but at the shin, just a bone sticking out. It didn't even look real. It looked like I was watching a slasher movie and it was a prop. I don't think I gave it a ton of thought. I was more focused on making sure the tree wasn't going to catch again. I didn't want to bring that old oak back to me. I didn't want to experience what had happened to those stupid kids. I called it in when I got back to my tower. Roland said that there was nothing that could have been done, but I didn't feel any better about it. Now, I said my medication made me sleepwalk earlier, yeah. That still happened, but most times I didn't leave the tower, just bumbled around it aimlessly. Except one time. I remember just getting ready to sleep. I saw the oak wandering around towards the river and I let Percy know. He didn't answer. It was weird. I radioed him again and after a few minutes he did respond. Said he wasn't feeling well. I remember worrying about him and I settled into bed. I remember only waking up because I couldn't hear. I thought I was dead. Thought I was just gone. I had apparently wandered from my tower this time and fallen down a ravine. I couldn't even remember things hurting, just the silence. I remember, even in that wake-up fog, that the oak was near. It had to be, even in the silence. There was nothing else, just the oak. I closed my eyes. It was the safest thing. I didn't know where it was and I wasn't about to find out, especially when I felt the ground shake beneath me and the roots of the oak rumbling and groaning as it approached. I wanted to look, you know. That was it. I wanted to look. I desperately wanted to. Something moved under me and I thought I was about to die. I really did. I thought those roots were going to drag me under the dirt and I would be gone. But something dug under me and I was lifted up. I really wanted to look. There was a strange feeling in my chest, not like heartburn, but not like asthma either. Something was getting drawn out of me and I don't know what it was. I am never going to know, and that's maybe for the best. It was taking something from me, and maybe that was enough. I've never been so afraid before or since. Just held in a jumble of bark and brambles and being carried somewhere. I thought it was going to eat me. I really did. Thought this was the last I would ever be seen, and no one would know until I didn't call in. It seemed like forever before it set me down. I stayed motionless until I could hear again, and I know I had an acorn in my hand. Once I opened my eyes, the sun was already coming up and I was left in my tower. I know that old oak doesn't care about us, not like humans do, but maybe it knew I wasn't supposed to be out that night or something. I don't know, and I can't ask it. I asked Marcy about it when I heard her check in that morning. She didn't know why I did that, and neither did Roland. Percy had an idea, but it was the same as me. That maybe it knew we weren't supposed to be out that night. Maybe it thought that I was hurt, and maybe me, like the other lookouts, needed to be taken care of. As for what it took from me, I still don't know. I didn't feel any different, save for every now and then I get chest pains. I had sworn I wasn't going back, but once I was saying my goodbyes to Marcy, Percy, and Roland at the end of my tenure, I realized that I had to come back. Even with the old oak wandering around, I had really liked it. Guess I just kept coming back. I now know that it was where I needed to be.